Art Green. Thank you very much for sitting down with us on the Men's Health Archive doing an interview.
Yeah, no worries. No, pleased to be here.
So I know a bit about you growing up, the fact that you grew up, you're a farm boy from outside, what was it, in Martinborough?
Yeah.
Yeah, saying it a little
Yeah.
bit close. And then you went into Wellington and Christchurch. You were a sports science major in college.
Yeah.
Grew up with 6 sisters and your mom and dad. Tell us
You've done research.
a little bit, just the basics, just so we can get through it. Tell us a little bit about that life and how reflecting of being a man and growing up with 6 sisters, and you were always a very active person, always very good looking from what I can tell. And that transition from more of a rural life into the college life and city life is that.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, firstly, I wasn't always a handsome man.
No?
I went through a very, very ugly, awkward sort of early teens, even before that, from the age of about 8 up until about mid-teens. Yeah, I was pretty ugly. And I was very annoying. My parents split up when I was about 7, and I went through a few years, like a good 2 or 3 years of being pretty difficult, pretty annoying to be around.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, a lot of them reflect on that with a bit of humor about how annoying I was back then. Yeah, I guess growing up on a farm is a pretty cool thing to do. I look back now, and I'd love to have kids kind of soon, and I'd love for them to have an upbringing similar to what I had, living off the land as much as we could back then, which was great. And yeah, it's in the farming community, especially in New Zealand, it's very, I guess it's kind of very macho. People don't talk about their feelings. There are large, dairy farming is the predominant form of farming here in New Zealand, and it's actually quite a huge problem, the mental health epidemic with dairy farmers in New Zealand who are very isolated, and they have very high suicide rates here in New Zealand. But for me, I've always had a very loving and close family, so I've never felt isolated in any stage. I definitely found it a big transition moving into the city when I was about, I think I was around about 6 or 7, and I remember starting school in the city school and having big fights with my mum about having to wear shoes to school because I just used to wear bare feet all day, every day, and I couldn't understand why I suddenly had to wear shoes. So yeah, without realizing it at the time, it was a huge transition for me moving into a city life. Yeah, and then the first couple of years I think I transitioned pretty easily, and then I never really thought about it until now when I'm currently living in this city life that I've grown up in. That I'm kind of thinking that it's not so healthy for us, and I feel like I'm part of a big swarm of people that are just working as hard as they can, and it's almost a competition to see who can work the hardest. And I think that it's not good for anyone's mental health. So that's that's my view on things.
You got into the sports science stuff and you went to Australia and then you came to the States for a bit and you were a camp counselor. That's how I met you. You were a tennis counselor for a while. And from my sense, you've always been a pretty active guy. You just finished up the New York Marathon. You did the New Zealand coast to coast and that kind of thing. How was that time in the Outback? I saw that you talked about that was the first time you ever really sat and had to slow down and get introverted. And I thought it was pretty interesting that you also became very reflective of your own health and your diet. And that was the beginning of your paleo discoveries. So how do you juxtapose those two, the active lifestyle and the more mindful and reflective?
Yeah. Great question. That was it was a big transition for me, moving into the outback of Australia. So I lived there for about 18 months. To paint a picture of it, Perth is the most isolated city in the world, I think. It's the furthest city from any other city. So I was working not in Perth, but a 2-hour flight north of Perth in the middle of the outback, surrounded by red dirt. And it was a 1,000-man mining camp, which was just kind of set up in the middle of the desert. Mm-hmm. And my job there at that mining camp was to run the gym. So all the miners would go off to work during the day. They'd come back to the campsite at night, and I'd run them through fitness classes or take them through nutritional plans or whatever. It was literally just me and the treadmills and the dumbbells. So at the start, I found it very. I struggled with it at the start. I had never been a person that had liked to be alone. I love the company of people. I'm very social, and so to go from that life to then just being very solitary was quite hard, I think, for me initially. But I then learned to, probably in the space of maybe 6 months, I started to really enjoy it. It sort of motivated me to use the time wisely, and I started to learn a lot more. I had a lot of downtime, so I would just read and learn, and I treated it as a time to improve myself. So I had this newfound goal of that I could live in, and to do that, I needed to find out a few things. Like how to create the healthiest body. And at the time I didn't know. I mean, I'd studied some of the stuff, nutrition and everything, but I really didn't know because there were so many different schools of thought on what sort of diet's the best diet to follow and what you should be doing to lose weight. And so I decided to try and find out for myself, and I just experimented. And I would work for 4 weeks in a row up on this mine site, and then I'd have 1 week off, go back down to Perth, or I'd travel around Australia or something like that. So in the 4-week stints, I would follow a certain type of diet. So I tried different types of diets, and I tried vegetarianism, veganism, raw food diets, ketogenic diets. I tried isogenics, which is like a supplement regime. One of the last ones that I tried was a paleo diet, and that one kind of just made the most sense to me. I felt the best on it from an energy level. I've always been pretty slim and active, and so I've always thought of myself as being really healthy, but it wasn't until I changed up what I was eating that I just realized that my brain was just firing so much quicker, and I had so much more energy, and that resulted in a huge improvement to my positivity, and like just everything, I seemed a bit happier. So that was a big turning point, I think, for me in my life, was changing my diet. And yeah. What was the question? I just kind of went off.
No problem. That was very interesting that you were so experimentative with your diet. Do you take that attitude and anything else, like towards your exercise, your sleep habits, your mental habits do you do any meditations or anything like that kind of?
Yeah, absolutely. So I use pretty much everything. I don't like to take one person's word for it. I don't like to just believe everything I read. And I think that everybody is different. So everybody's body is different, responds differently to different things. Paleo works well for me, might not work well for you, might not work well for, I know it doesn't work well for my mum. But, my personal belief is that it's the best nutritional kind of framework for the majority of the population. And then so with exercise, I've experimented with heaps of different forms of exercise. And now currently I don't like to be too specialized in any one thing, because I like to be able to turn my hand at almost anything. And so whether it's to, train for 4 months and run a marathon, or do the coast to coast, which is a big multi-sport event here in New Zealand. At the moment, now that I've got the running out of the way, I'm like, cool, I'm going to try to do a bit more resistance training, see if I can put on muscle, and just try something different. I like to do that because it also kind of just keeps it fresh in my head and I don't get bored with things. But with mental health as well, you mentioned meditation, and that's been huge for me. That's something that I've experimented with. I started experimenting with it when I was in the mines 6 or 7 years ago. And at the time, when I was doing it, I just was really enjoying it, but I didn't really see any benefits to my mental well-being. I think it was at a time where I perhaps, I don't think I needed, I think my mental health was great back then. I think a lot of that is because I had absolutely no worries. And so it was really cool. I kind of learned these little tips and techniques of how to meditate back then, but then only in the last 2 years have I started to meditate almost daily. At the moment, it's daily, and it's incredible just the changes it's made to my my relationships and just the understanding of myself, the way that my brain works and my ability to function and to kind of just take in situations and not react immediately, but figure out why I'm thinking a certain way and to figure out the best way to react and to deal with the situation. So yeah, meditation's a huge tool in my mental health toolbox, I would say.
Cool. You've been very open with so much of your life for the last couple of years. You were the first New Zealand Bachelor. Congratulations. And that must have been another crazy transition of your life, going from such a private person. I know you had a lot of close friends and you've always been very outgoing and friendly from what I've seen, but to put your life in the spotlight of the public, is there anything that you are hesitant about that or any difficulties going in? And now that you're there, do you bring those lessons with you at all, or are you cognizant of what you want to portray to all the masses of people that you're being shown to?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that was a huge transition, becoming a public figure. The actual initial part of deciding to go on the show and going on the show was a huge decision for me, and one that I probably didn't. Had I known what would happen afterwards, I think I would have considered it even more stringently. Like I would have thought about it a little bit harder as well. But the biggest thing was coming out of coming off that show. As soon as I was on TV, overnight, I had overnight people knew who I was here in New Zealand. New Zealand's small, it's like 4.5 million people. If anyone in America is watching this and they know someone from New Zealand, I can guarantee you that I know that person or at least know someone who knows them. So it also coincided, this was about 4 years ago, and it coincided with the rise of social media, predominantly Instagram. Mm-hmm. And so overnight, I went from having a private Instagram feed where I can just have my life out there and say whatever I want, post whatever I want, be very carefree, to then suddenly I'm having to be very thoughtful and careful about every single thing that I post, because one is probably going to find things in it, and something could be misconstrued, turned around, or used to bring me down in the media. So I learned very quickly. Probably took me a year, which I think is quite quick in the scheme of things, just to figure out how the media works and what I can and can't say, and how careful I need to be, what I can and can't post, and essentially, it's like I try to be myself as much as I can through my social media, but I have to do it in a very toned down PC version that's very mindful of other people, I guess. And yeah, it's difficult at times. I recently I have a business, a health food business here in New Zealand, and we we had some really bad luck with a manufacturing facility of ours getting destroyed. Anyway, the media picked it up. It wasn't really news, but because I'm associated with the business, I'm kind of the face of the business. It got thrown into the media, and it's just it's difficult. It adds another layer of complexity and another layer of stress that I do have to be mindful of. But it's also one that I have learnt to deal with a bit as well.
Do you have any friends who've been your longtime friends who've been able to have a conversation and say like, "Hey, buddy, Art, I know things have changed in your life, but I'm always here for you," or friends that have come from the celebrity world of, "Hey, I understand the struggles you might be going through, but it'll get calmer and life goes on," kind of thing?
Yeah, interesting question. So I definitely have a lot of the former, and that being that I've got a lot of friends from years that have just constantly supported me the whole way through, and I've definitely leaned on them from time to time, and they've really kept me grounded. At times they've told me to pull my head in, and it's just been invaluable having them throughout this whole process. I was actually thinking the other day, I don't think I've maybe met maybe one, maybe two people since from like the celebrity realm who I would consider to be friends, who I'd consider to be that I'd actually want to hang out with. But generally, everyone I've met since I became the Bachelor, since I was on TV, I would rather spend time with my long-term friends than I would with these new people.
Right. And how's your family see that? They've watched you go through all these changes. I know you've always been very close with most of your sisters and your mom as well. Have they come to support, or was there any little kicks in the butt of, "Art, you're on television, you better save face for the family"?
It's been an interesting one actually for the family. I think my dad has been the rock for me in our family. He's supported me so well throughout the whole thing, and he's always treated me exactly the same. My mum she slightly didn't really understand a lot of the situations, and would kind of treated some of the stuff in the media as it would kind of get sucked in by things and think that this is not real, but in the end, like it's actually my life.
Right.
So I think it's been a big learning for her as well. And as well, my sisters have been so supportive of me. I know that my elder sister she probably wouldn't admit it, but she kind of struggled a little bit with me becoming a public figure. And yeah, I think there are a lot of complexities that I can't even really explain them. But there are a lot of complexities that come about from someone, especially someone very close to you, becoming very well known.
Yeah. No, absolutely. The whole fascination of personality and fame and everything is a very interesting, when you get down to the brain chemistry of it, of these masses, and because I know him and he knows him, that he's somebody, that thinking. Is there any thing you've done of, now that you've become, I don't want to say so big, and you are a figure of New Zealand now with your companies and that mustache, the face, like, essentially. Yeah. Oh, okay. So let's talk some Movember. You was this your first year that you participated in Movember?
No, I've done it the last few years. This is the first year when I've really got involved with it in a big way.
Yeah.
So here in New Zealand, I've been a Movember ambassador.
Mm-hmm.
I got selected to run the New York Marathon for Movember, and throughout, I guess over the last sort of 3 months actually. Yeah. So for 3 months, I've been running a a run club, just getting more people involved and active, and getting more people active, basically, and then also just kind of promote activity as a means of supporting everyone's mental health. So, yeah, that's kind of been my involvement this year, alongside trying to raise a whole bunch of money to help with mental health research here in New Zealand. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
What else do you want to talk about? A bit about our mental health. So is there any tips or tricks that you personally throughout this entire journey have had to turn to? At that time when you were reading, you got more internal, I guess. Do you go back to that ever, now that things are a bit more intense from time to time, that there are the pressures and life isn't as cushy as it used to be?
Yeah, my tips and tricks, I sometimes look back and I wish I would just love to go back to that time. I think back on that time as a time in my life when I had no worries. I had a good income coming in, but mainly I had a roof over my head, and I had great food on the table, and I had no worries. I had no investments in any property that could go wrong. I had I had a secure job. There was just nothing that could go wrong. So I had very, very little stress. So for me, it was in my life. And then since then, I've developed a lot of, I like to call them tools, tools in my mental health toolbox that help me through different times. I generally use all of them in any 1 month, say, but predominantly, historically, physical activity has been my number one. So I know that I feel so much better if I'm physically active every single day. So I'm physically active every single day for generally an hour a day, whether it's going for a walk and then doing something, going to the gym, or just going to the gym for a session, or joining in a fitness class. I like to train for events because then I'm sort of I'm training for something rather than just being physical sort of aimlessly. So for me, that's great. I know that the benefits for me physically and mentally, and I know that by doing it consistently, it has an incredible effect on my overall mental well-being. But I also know it has an acute effect on me in that for example, today, it's been quite a stressful day for me. And straight after this chat with you guys, I'm going to go for a run because I just I want to de-stress, and I know it's going to make me feel so much better. So I'm already thinking about that as I'm sitting here. I'm looking forward to that. Meditation has been the latest. Meditation's been huge for me as well, and it's something that I have. I didn't realize how beneficial it was until I'd been doing it consistently for about 2 months. I think, but like 2 to 3 months. I think after 2 to 3 months of consistently meditating, that's when I personally noticed big differences. And it's everyone talks about it and says it's blah blah blah, and for a lot of people it sounds a bit woo woo. And when I first heard about it, I thought it was a little bit too spiritual for me. And now I don't like going a day without meditating.
Did you find it difficult to learn it all, or to teach yourself to get over that hump of when you're frustrated that you weren't actually doing any meditation per se? You're just kind of sitting there. How did you push through that hump?
Yeah. I like to research things quite a lot. So I had learned that a lot of people find that there's a hump. A lot of people find that they can't get into meditation. A lot of people find that they are just sitting there aimlessly. So, and I've also talked to a lot of people who meditated, who just told me that might happen. So I kind of went into it expecting to not really get it, and to just kind of sit there quietly for, for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes at a time, and not really feel anything or get anything out of it. So I was kind of expecting. I don't even know if that happened. I feel like I looked at the whole situation as a time to just sit and be still and be quiet. And just the act of doing that was positive in itself and beneficial. So I think, and even if you are sitting there thinking about things rather than having a sort of a clear mind, I think that's still beneficial. I think just taking the time to be by yourself, to try and be present, it's so beneficial. I use an app called Headspace. I now also use another app called Insight Timer, and I found those apps to be really helpful, along with going to the odd group meditation. Yeah, the combination of using an app, but also joining in some little group meditation sessions every now and then is super beneficial. Yeah. And then another tool that I have recently started using, I would even say socializing is a huge tool for me. I play social sport twice a week. I play different types of social sport. Not only that, but I have to really make a conscious effort to try and catch up with people and make the time for it, because if I don't make the time for it, it doesn't happen. Everyone's too busy with work and everything. So for me, it's actually scheduling that into my diary as if it's an important meeting, because it really is an important meeting. Just catching up with a mate, going for a drink, just whatever. But another tool that I've started using is a breathing technique. It's like Wim Hof breathing. He's this crazy Dutchman who has this really interesting breathing technique. A lot of ice baths. And so I've been kind of dabbling with that over the last 6 months or so, and I found that really beneficial. It's a really good way, basically, to help deal with stress. I found it really helpful for me dealing with stress. A lot of the idea with the ice baths is that you're controlling your autonomic nervous system, so you're controlling your stress response, and then that means that in everyday life you're better able to control your stress response, and you don't get as stressed. So without realizing, you don't actually get as stressed during day-to-day life or day-to-day stressful situations. Yeah. So those are some of the tools that I have in my little mental health toolbox.
Very cool. I've seen that guy before, and I've heard that people sometimes have some very emotional reactions when doing that breathing technique. Did you experience that at all?
Yeah, hang on. I'm just getting a call that's coming through my computer. I don't know if you heard that. With the first workshop I did, I found it pretty cool. And then, it was almost spiritual without him in any way being spiritual.
Right.
There was a woman doing the workshop with me, and she burst into tears. But I think a part of that was that she'd actually been doing it for almost like a year, I think. And
yeah.
She was someone who had, she'd come from being incredibly anxious. She couldn't even be out. She struggled to be outside at a point in time because she would be so anxious. And she used ice baths and Wim Hof breathing to completely fix herself. So for her, it was a hugely special thing for her. So yeah, it was incredibly emotional.
Well, very cool. I hope that the rest of your day is less emotional, a little bit less stressful. Enjoy your run. Thank you so much for sitting down for us. Is there anything you want to add or plug or anything like that before you let you go?
No, man. I just want to say that I love what you guys are doing. I think you're doing some awesome work. Yeah, you guys rock.
Hats off to you too, sir. Thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Right on.
Take care, boss.
Yeah.